Just a kind of quick recap as to where we've been so far. So again, for those of you who have forgotten, my name is Matt Quick. I am one of the engineers here. I've also got Ed Signs with me as well. Kevin's been hosting for us. So, and what we've been going over so far is a lot of our systems products. So the first thing we did was got a really good foundation as far as what each of them can do. And then we played around with a few different scenarios as far as like, hey, I've got this issue with the website. How do I go through and go about troubleshooting, right? And we really did focus on websites, but the cool thing is those angles can be taken in any direction, whether it is a website or maybe it's, you start with Active Directory. No, there's not a synthetic transaction to it, but there's still backend services and servers and services you can take a look at, be able to see performance data. So, a lot of good stuff. I will have to put, or I don't have to. I would like to put an apology out there about the networking side. I didn't know that there was a comment about that was wanting a little more network focus. So yeah, and that's actually really great feedback because I know we did want feedback as far as what you like to see in the future. We can definitely do that because this is just a first in this series. So, all right, so let's get right back into it. So what we've done a really good job of talking about is performance data and how do I interpret this data and where do I go into next in interpreting this data, right? But performance isn't everything, right? And let's face it, on the system side of things, it's expensive. Servers are expensive. Virtualization is even more expensive. Storage is, wow. So, a lot of really what I like to look is also kind of those trends and analysis. So that kind of gets us into our next section of what I like to call recommending recommendations. And that's kind of going through the environment and actually showing like what do we get and where are we going with this and how can I use that as far as like, let's make I wouldn't say an educated guess, but a more of a guidance as to where I want to go. So for this one, let me go ahead and share my screen again. And to go over a few of my environments, never did. Let me go back to the main homepage here, and I'm going to make sure Ed still has control over here. And I'm going to go ahead and say, Ed, take this one away here. Kind of give us a little rundown as far as like what can we do, especially in the virtual and storage environments, like with trending and analysis.
Yeah, so as we know, we talked about it right now, we can take a look at the application layers and services and processes and, even the server at the OS or maybe even the physical. But what happens with that layer that nobody sees, that virtual layer that's kind of hidden from everybody except for your virtual administrator, right? Or maybe you're wearing that hat as well, right? And you need that visibility. BMan is a great tool to kind of come in and help virtual administrators or even system administrators kind of see where they're at with regards to kind of planning their environment, right? Not just planning, but going in ad hoc and taking a look at what's going on right now. What is happening at a 50,000 foot level? What is happening at a 100 foot level, right? So I'll show you a couple of things. I'll be showing you, we'll talk about our recommendations engine. We'll talk about our sprawl. We'll talk about our capacity planning. But one thing I wanted to hit on was our storage, right? So if you notice when we were taking a look at those, all the products, how they work together, and we kind of had those additional tabs on the VM and the additional tabs on the host that said storage, that said virtualization, right? This is the kind of capacity planning that I kind of take a look at that gives you visibility at that 50,000 foot view. And when I click on that storage tab, basically what this is giving me is my entire environment. I don't care if it's VMware, Hyper-V, and Nutanix that you have in there. It's going to take a look at that entire environment and say, hey, this is the amount of data stores. Now, you could have Hyper-V, so that's one thing we do is we still call them data stores within Orion, within vMan, right? But it could be a cluster shared volume, right? I've got 261 virtual machines. I've got a couple of vSAN data stores I'm monitoring, 6 hosts that are vSAN, 3 AHV hosts, Nutanix, right? 4 storage containers on Nutanix. But you'll notice this is kind of my 50,000 foot view. And here I am just taking a look at where I'm at. Who are my top guys with regards to data stores by free space and VMs by storage consumed, even what data store they're on, right? Who are my top guys here? And who are my top guys with regards to when this space is going to run out. When is that VM disk depletion? When is that data store going to run out, right? So we'll always list the top guys here, as well as performance, right? My top data store throughputs, my top VM IOPS, my top VM latencies across the environment, kind of pitted against each other, but it also giving you that indication of which one are your top guys, which guys are really kind of causing the most noise on the line here, right? And you're probably saying, well, that's all good and great that you're giving me these top, but I notice there's only 5 or 10 on here, right? What if I need to know specifically on a cluster or specifically on a host who those top guys are? Well, it's a matter of just going to that level. Easy enough, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use VMware for this example. So I'm just going to go back to that virtualization summary, right? And you're going to notice that I'm going to go ahead and open up one of these vCenters here, and I'm simply going to go to the cluster level, right? And when I go to the cluster level, here I go. Here's my vCenter, my data center, my cluster, my hosts, and then the VMs within this host. If I go to this cluster, I can hover over it just to get, high-level stuff. That's the data center, I'm sorry. Here's my cluster. Once I click into the cluster, remember we're at the 50,000-foot view. Well, now I want to take a look at the point of view of the cluster, because before I was getting my Hyper-V and my Nutanix and VMware. Well, I need to know specifically on this VMware cluster what's going on. So very, very similar to what Matt had showed you at the host level, I can also see my VM information on this cluster, as well as the CPU and the memory effective load that it's having on this cluster, right? Or that they are having on this cluster. The cool thing is now that I'm want to look beyond that 50,000-foot level, maybe I want to drop to 30,000 feet now because I want to see the cluster level, you'll notice a storage tab here. And when I click on the storage tab, this is only going to give me from the point of view of the cluster, my top data store by free space, my top VMs by free space, by performance as well, right? So now I'm starting to dig down a little bit deeper, and I'm starting to be able to use this information to kind of plan where I'm at, right? If I want to go a little bit deeper, it's just a matter of going ahead and choosing a host now, right? So I'll choose one of the hosts on here. So as I choose a host, it's going to take me to that SAM view because I'm going to see the host information. And then vMan's bringing my hardware health in as well, right? We saw this already. But I'm going to have the ability to come over here and not just click on the virtualization portion, but click on the storage. So now let's say I'm at the 10,000-foot view. Because now I can see all the storage capacity run out dates and my top guys that are only from the point of view of this host, as well as my top performers on this host. Which data store, which VM is pushing IOPS, is pushing latency on this host, right? A lot of great information from this point of view. Maybe now I want to get a little bit deeper. Maybe now I need to get to a specific VM, right? So I'll go ahead and just click on a VM down here, and I can access this information from any VM, right, that I choose. And here's my hypervisor information that we had already seen on the VM, my VMware events, all that cool stuff, all the management functions that I can do. And if you remember, Matt had chosen the storage tab. Well, that's my 100-foot view, right? Now I'm looking at specifically the VM and the data store or data stores that are related to this VM, so I can see exactly how this is performing. Not only do I get that VM performance right here in the data store, IOPS and latency, I also get each individual virtual disk IOP and latency, so I can go ahead and see which one of those guys might be hidden here, right? And ultimately, I can go back to the data stores we saw before and kind of correlate all that data. So that's really kind of my ad hoc, where am I at, how much free space do I have left on these objects, which ones are my biggest hitters with regards to IOPS and latency, how are they affecting my host, how are they affecting my cluster, right? And I can get down individually into each VM and each VM disk. It's really cool to be able to do that. It's just a matter of learning how to kind of navigate the tool. Unfortunately, there's a little curve to it, but all the data is there for you. There's nothing you have to do extra. Once we start gathering this data from vCenter, from Hyper-V, it's all going to be presented for you. It's just a matter of you clicking around, right? So that's kind of one way to kind of get there. And that's not really recommendations. That's more of just knowing where you're at with your storage, right? That is kind of planning for that storage capacity, right? It's a little bit different than this capacity planning that we'll talk about in a minute, right? Next is my kind of my ad hoc. Okay, Ed, that's great. You know, I know what I've got out there right now, but I'm really kind of interested on how my environment is performing. You know, this vendor told me to configure this VM a certain way for this application. I have 5 SQL or 5 Oracle database servers that I need to spin up, and I've got several clusters. I don't know which cluster, you know, do I have enough resources out there to do this? Do I have any VMs that aren't doing anything? Do I have any orphan VMDKs in VMware? How do my snapshots looking, right? This is more of an ad hoc type of tool. It's what we call sprawl. So if you're not familiar with the term sprawl, basically in the VM world, it's gotten so easy that, you know, before I used to take a whole 24 hours to deploy a server, and I worked in the data center for years. Stack and rack that server, connect it, configure it, install the OS, install whatever else I needed on it, the applications, configure networking for it. You know, by the time it was done, it could have been the next day before I was totally done and it's ready to go. But now things have gotten so easy with virtualization that it's easy enough to spin up a VM and you're up and going with an application on it within an hour, right? But it's gotten so easy, again, to just spin up a VM that we've kind of got into that mode of just spinning up and spinning up and spinning up and spinning up and not really taking a look at the back end. So that's kind of like when I was 20 years old and I got my first debit card. I was just kind of, yeah, sure, here's debit, sure, here's debit, here's debit, here's debit. But I wasn't paying attention to the balance on my bank, and I got in trouble more times than I'd like to count. So this page kind of lets you know that, right? My sprawl page is letting me know several different statistics out there that we gather over a 7-day period to let me know exactly what's going on. So it's more ad hoc, right? What's going on right now? How many VMs do I have out there that are doing specific things, that are underallocated with regards to vCPU, or overallocated? Over-allocated with regards to memory, right? What does this mean? Well, this means that, hey, you know, you've got a certain amount of VMs out there that we've been kind of seeing that have been running at an average of 100% of CPU load on this particular one over the last 7 days. This one's been running at an average of 86, 84. And, you know, if that's the way that it's working, maybe you should think about increasing the CPU count on that. Maybe you already know that, but maybe you're not aware if you have enough resources out there as well. So that's where this guy comes in, kind of Robin Hood kind of thinking, right? Well, I've got these over-allocated VMs here that are not doing that much work. And once I've kind of taken a look at that VM and I've gone and done my investigation, I say, yeah, that's how he's been working for the last month or 6 months, because, you know, it's a low performing application. I might be able to take this recommendation of reducing the vCPUs here, right? And then I have now freed up some resources to give to the guys up here, right? So instead of going off to my manager and asking for money for more resources on the back end, on my clusters, on my hosts, right? I'm able to kind of reclaim and reallocate those resources here. And the same thing goes for the memory side, right? The cool thing is that you can go ahead and make those changes from here. Notice that we reiterate the recommendation here, and we go ahead and allow you to go ahead and do that. So these are the same management functionalities that we saw on the VM side, right? When you're on the VM thing, these are the same management functionalities that you can do from here. So that's my resources, CPU, my memory, right? But we got a couple other things. What about specifically for VMs that may be out there that aren't doing anything? Zombie VMs, right? Have you heard that term? Those are my idle VMs. So I've got space down here over the last 7 days. These guys have had very low activity with regards to CPU, IOPS, and net throughput, right? Again, going out, taking a look at these, you know, that's totally up to you. That would be my responsibility to go out and say, hey, what is this guy doing? Who's using it? What applications are on here? And if I deem that it's not necessary, I can power off the VM from in here, right? Reclaim those resources on that cluster, on that host that it's currently on. And if ultimately I have VMs that are out there that haven't been used at all, right? Well, I can go ahead and delete those VMs. so I can reclaim those resources. So again, it's all about being a Robin Hood in here, reclaiming those resources, reallocating to where they're needed, without you having to go on the back end and having to spend money, spend time, spend downtime, having to to upgrade your stuff. You can do everything from here, especially if you've got projects coming up. I need it to spin up this VM. I need this much resources. Do I have it? Where can I get it from? This is a great place to come and take a look. Again, it's an ad hoc kind of view, right? We'll talk about longer term recommendations in a minute. This kind of ad hoc, very quick, let me know where I'm at kind of thing, right? Specifically for VMware, we got a couple things here. Before I do that, I'm going to talk about space. So I can take a look at my last 10 VM snapshots by disk usage here, right? So my top 10, and I'll have the ability to not just, go in and delete the entire snapshot, but depending on your snapshot policies, if you're doing 1, 2 an hour, if you're doing, 24 a day, once an hour, you can go in and delete the child snapshots and leave the newest one there. And that is just so you can reclaim some disk space, right? Specifically for VMware, we've got a couple other things. One is the co-stop percentage here. So VMware has this co-stop percentage statistic that they use. If you're not familiar with VMware, basically they say that throwing CPUs at a VM doesn't always help. Sometimes it hinders performance of that VM and the application, obviously, that's on the VM. So they have a statistic that helps you kind of figure out whether or not that's a balance, and whether or not you may need to drop the CPUs on there as opposed to adding more, right? So that's specifically for VMware. We'll have that on there. And again, specifically for VMware, in VMware, if you do delete a VM, right, you'll notice that when you right-click on the VM, it doesn't actually say delete. It says remove from inventory. It's a two-step process to delete VMs, right? So that VM disk will actually sit there in limbo. It will be not connected to a VM at all. But the file will still be there, and that's called an orphan VMDK, right? So a lot of these we may forget about. Sometimes administrators will remove from inventory, leave the VMDK there just in case they need to spin that VM up once again. But some of these VMs can be very large in size. Actually, we had one customer a couple of years ago that was actually doing a pre-sales evaluation, and within a week they found, how much was it, Matt? I think it was 10 or 12 terabytes of space of orphan VMDKs that they were able to reclaim. And they bought just because of that visibility. The great thing is that we're giving you the data store that it's on, the VMDK file, and if need be, again, I would always recommend doing your investigation, finding out what this is for, who's keeping it, but if you don't need it, you have the ability to delete the data store file there and reclaim that disk space. So it's a nice little feature that we do have. Like I said, it's more ad hoc than anything, but it is a nice place to go and reclaim and reallocate those resources. That would be great, especially if I have VMs out there that aren't performing, or not VMs, but applications that aren't performing the way they should be, right? I've got SQL running slow, Oracle running slow, Apache running slow, IIS maybe, and a homegrown application that's having problems. Well, my guest OS is telling me everything's fine, and it's only using 32% CPU, but when I come here, I notice that the CPU is taxed on that VM at the hypervisor layer, and obviously I'm going to need to add some stuff on there, right? So it's a lot of information to digest, but it's a lot of critical information that administrators from virtual environments need to know, right? If we are talking more in the long term, maybe cluster resources, right? Maybe this is going to help Band-Aid your problem. Yeah, I don't need to go ask my boss for money. I can fix this right now. I can spin up that special project a VM that I have. But what about down the line? Hey, Ed. Hey, Matt. We got a meeting in 30 minutes, and they want to know if you need how much budget you need in the next 6 months to a year. Can you have that information ready for me? That's 30 minutes for Matt to go off and do that. Matt stresses very easily, so I don't know if I want to do that to him. So I give him the ability to come into Virtualization Manager and come to capacity planning. And that's basically what this is. Capacity planning is going to allow me to run data modeling scenarios, right? Different ones. One, maybe to run checkups on my clusters to see where they might be at in 3 months, 6 months, a year, right? Maybe I want to simulate adding VMs to certain clusters, simulate adding host computers, right, to certain clusters. Maybe they're only giving me enough budget to buy one host, and I've got 3 clusters. Which cluster would it best befit me to squeeze this into? Right? The VMs as well. Which cluster can handle this VM that I'm about to spin up, because this is going to be a big boy. Where can I squeeze it into that's not going to impact me too much, right? Or maybe I just want to run checkup. Then I got the bottom one that kind of does the 2-for-1, the VMs and host computers one. But it's really cool, because all I'm doing is using historical data, and I got to have at least 30 days worth of historical data, right? I'll select my modeling window. Maybe I want to know 3 months from now, Matt, or a specific date. Maybe I'm doing migrations, and I need to know a specific date, right? So I can work with this. And I'll click next, and I'll pick a cluster or clusters that I want to go ahead and check, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and say, well, which resources do I want to know? I know I bought a truckload of disk space last year. No need for this. So I'll take that off. Or maybe I do need to have it on there. So we'll look at those 3 resources and where your clusters are going to be, right, within that allotted amount of time that I chose. What kind of history do I want, right? I've had vMan running for a year. Maybe it's been the busiest that I've ever seen it in the last 3 months, and I kind of want to offset that because it's not always that busy. Maybe I'll take 6 months of data. Maybe I do want to take the busiest times, and I can go ahead and do the last 6 months or the last 90 days or the last 30 days as I see fit, right? Recommended, like I said, is 30 days or more, so we need at least 30 days of data to go ahead and do this. Once I choose that, now I can kind of say, well, how do I want this report? Do I just kind of want a general balance report? You know, do I want a 75th percentile? Give me a little breathing room, a little bubble wrap, or do I need that top, very tight line conservative report with no room to spare? Do I have any failover hosts that I want to go ahead and include that? And once I do that and I run, this is the check report. We can just take a look at one of these quick reports. This is going to go ahead and just give us that information there, right? This is, the check that I'm running from this date to this date. Here's my projection date. Here's my workload currently. And, apologies, this is a demo, so it's not changing much, right? As you notice, here's my current layout. Here's my projected growth is 0 because it is a demo, but if this were a real environment, I might have some projected growth here and what the total should be. The resources as well, right? So not just my workload on these, but the resources that I might need as well. And then I come down here and I can go ahead and compare a couple of things, right? Well, what's my CPU usage from my actual utilization versus my simulated utilization? So I'll have the first couple of weeks or a few days here, and then you'll notice the line skews because now it's going into a longer term. So if I've chosen 6 months, might have the first few weeks here and the next couple of months here, and that's just, showing me, at an exaggeration what that looks like. But it's important to see where you're at and where you might be. Giving you that information of that trend, where you might be simulated with a specific period of time of what I'm going to need for that CPU usage. 20 years is a lot, and that's because this guy isn't doing much on the demo, so apologies for that again. But I think you get the idea there. So there's my CPU, there's my memory, and obviously there's my disk usage. And as with anything else in the real world and not the real world, disk usage is always a concern, right? Telling me I have, 3 days, 7 days to that. So here, what I might really be concerned with, if this were real, is really only disk space is a concern that I might need to add, right? So the comment that I made at the very beginning, not a good comment about disk space in this particular case. Additional recommended hosts, if we do feel you might need more hosts in these clusters, we'll pop that down here as well. And then there's some advanced settings, for that we have down here that you might have chosen or not chosen. Okay, so it's really cool to be able to run those capacity reports. I've given Matt some time. He's got 30 minutes. He can run these reports within, 5 minutes. Have that ready. He can go to that meeting. He can say, hey, you know what? I'm going to need this many resources. I'm going to need this much money. You know what? You guys are wanting me to plan this special project with these VMs or these hosts. This is what's going to happen. This is where it's going to go. From the data modeling that I've seen, this is what I think we're going to need. And it's a really, really cool feature to kind of add on to that sprawl. This is more planning as opposed to the storage bit as well, where I'm kind of looking at space usage and object performance on a data store in the VM disk layer. This is taking a look at that cluster utilization, where I'm at, where I'm going to be, right? Now, if I want to kind of combine these, this one here and the sprawl, and I know, you probably heard 7 days on the sprawl, and you're like, well, that's only 7 days. Can you go longer? Yeah. That's where we come into our recommendations engine. That's a true recommendations engine, and we are taking some time on this. We're taking about 7 days, and we also have predictive recommendations that take 30 days into consideration. Right now, you can't change that. 30 days is going to be the max, but we do 30 days to look at seasonality within that 30 days. And the really cool thing about this is not only are we looking for, that at the VM layer like we were with Sprawl, we're going up to the host in the cluster level as well. So at the cluster level, we're taking a look at these recommendations. And I know there's a lot here to go through. Looks like 10 pages, but we make it easy for you. Why? Because we can break these up into strategies if we want. Do I want to take a look at, VM sizing? Show me my recommendations that are being hit by VM sizing right now. Or show me workload balance. Maybe I have a cluster that is unbalanced. Maybe I have 20 VMs running on one host and 2 VMs running the other. Is that the way it is because of the VM sizing? Or is it unbalanced, right? What about my host performance? How are these guys doing? What might I be able to do to rectify these situations here? Or storage capacity. I've got that ability as well, right? So we break those down. We have 3 types of recommendations, right? 2 of them are active recommendations, and 1 is the predictive. The active recommendations, you're going to notice one goes off, and you see this now here. That just means that there's an alert going off on that right now. So it's going to give me a recommendation that might be able to help me resolve that alert. The other active recommendation, like I said, is 7 days of data. And then I have my predictive recommendation. But they all kind of fall into the same layout, right? If I say, hey, you know what, this one here, CPU and memory utilization on this VM has been lower than the minimum threshold for more than 95% of the time, well, that is my problem. My recommendation that we give is, hey, why don't you decrease the number of CPUs in that VM from 4 to 2 and the memory from 16 to 112. That way you can free up resources for other VMs on this host. So I'm not looking at sprawl now. Now I'm taking a look at how this VM is performing over a certain period of time, right? And not only do I see that recommendation there, but maybe I want to take a look at historically what that VM was doing. So I'll click on the recommendation. Here's the problem again. The recommendation is listed. I have the steps to perform the recommendation. Power it off, power it on, so and so. I can go ahead and perform that recommendation now, or I can schedule it out of hours if I need to, right? But more importantly, am I lying to you? Well, let's go take a look at the statistics for the objects in this recommendation. In this case, there's only 2 objects, right? Here is the VM that we're asking you to make the changes on. When the CPU allocation for this VM is reduced to 2 CPUs, the requirements on the host will decrease by 50%. So here are my hosts down here, right? Now I'll go ahead and let you kind of take a look at this over the last 4 weeks, right? The last 2 weeks. How is this performing over this time? The last week and up to the last 24 hours. So I can really get a good indication of what this guy has been doing. We're going to go ahead and let you know what it's looking like now and what it's going to look like after the action is applied, right? On both levels, the host and the VM. Right? So a lot of information here for you to take in as far as that's concerned. You don't have to take the recommendation. Maybe you have, somewhere else you might want to move it. That's okay. This is just a recommendation from what we find. Now, obviously, if there is something like that, let's say this is a DRS cluster on VMware, you don't want this guy to do any recommendations on that DRS cluster, or you don't want to be able to have it to do any type of actions for the objects on that cluster. You have full capability of creating your own policies, right? Do I want to exclude objects from recommendations? Or it's a VM, it's a data store, it's a cluster, it's a host. Do I want to disallow actions for certain objects? I can do that as well, right? So I have full control over what is going to be contributing to that recommendation engines. And at that point, I still don't even have to take the recommendation if I don't want to. I can do other things, and once that, that threshold is complied with, that recommendation will no longer be there. Okay. Those three would be or those four actually, Matt, would be the four. I guess we could relate that to the problem we were having earlier. As far as that web performance, maybe it's not web performance, maybe it's not the application, maybe it's not the SQL application we're looking at, maybe it's one of the servers, maybe it's one of the VMs performing badly because maybe it's on a bad data store, something like that. So here's an example of my storage capacity, right? Maybe I'm running out of space on a data store. Here we go. Space utilization on a vSAN data store has reached warning threshold. My recommendation is to move it. So again, I can go in and take a look at it. And this one's actually part of an alert. So it even tells me, hey, you know what? If you do these recommendations, these two alerts are going to be cleared. Here's a problem and here's a recommendation. If you move this VM, the JRA demo, from this data store to Madrid 4, or add more resources to this vSAN, then your problem's going to be solved. And again, the statistics are here for all three of these objects now to go ahead and take a look at over that period of time. So I can make that move if I need to. Right.
So I have a question on this. Yeah, that recommendation's great and that data store's running out, but what if I'm reserving that data store for something? Or maybe that's a high-performing VM, and I want to make sure that whatever data store it's going to is also high-performing, and maybe the one it's recommending to go to really isn't. I mean, what are my options there to kind of check it?
Well, that's good. That's a good question. So basically on this, remember I said you don't have to take this recommendation. If there is something else that you're looking for with regards to that, you can always use the rest of our tools to go there, right? So let's take a quick look at maybe, what was that, the JDRA demo VM? Let's see what's related to that, right? So let's go back out. Oh, no, I can click up here, do a global search. I'll go ahead and type in that JDRA demo, and I should get it to hit here. Here we go. And I'll go to that VM, right? And again, we've got that VM here and how it's performing, but we're really worried about to see if it's on a high I/O data store, right? So remember, we go to that 100-foot view and click on the storage tab. And again, I'm going to be able to see how this VM is doing with regards to IOPS. And I see I do have some high latency on this guy and the data store that it's on. So I'll click on that vSAN data store, right? That was telling us to move it off of or move it to. And now from the data store point of view, I'm going to be able to, and I remember you showing this a little bit earlier, but from the data store point of view, I'm going to be able to see a lot of data that I can correlate to see, should this guy be on there, right? So if I come here, I can see, oh, there's more than one application using this data store just by looking at the app stack, but SAM also comes down here and tells me that. Okay, what are these VMs doing with regards to IOPS? Oh, there's a whole lot more than, I may only have 3 applications, but I have a whole lot more than one VM using this data store, right into this data store. And I can see that the latency is pretty high, and it's caused by a few of these, including the data store that I'm currently on, right? So maybe I do want to move it off. I think it said to move it off to one of these 2 JRA demo, and I could go to that one as well and take a look. But the idea is, yes, I can definitely come to that data store and take a look and see whether or not it's performing badly to where I may want to move my high performance guy off of, or whether I've got enough here where it's performing low where I can go ahead and move it on. So once I pick that, then I can move it to whatever data store I want, right? However, let's say that all my data stores are bad, high IOPS, high latency. Maybe I want to create a new data store, right? Do I have space to do that? Well, let's go off and take a look at SRM. That's my storage resource monitor. A couple clicks, I can tell you that, right? I'll go to storage summary, come out here, and SRM is going to go ahead and let me know, hey, these are all the arrays that you're monitoring, and I'm using the Pure because that's the newest one that I got, and I'm all in love with it now. So I think I want to look at the Pure, and just by clicking on the Pure array itself, I don't even have to click on it, right? I can see just by hovering over it that right now my raw disk capacity is full, which means I've got pools cut out, right? But my usable capacity is low. I've got plenty of space to start covering out pools and LUNs on there to go ahead and pop a new data store into. And if I need to, I can go ahead and click into the array itself just to see how the array is performing, right? I can see how those pools are performing if I choose to go to the pool level. But as I scroll down, again, I'm going to get that space or that capacity information down here. And you notice I go ahead and open this up, and it lets me know exactly, oh, well, you've got this pool right here. You've got plenty of space to go ahead and create some new stuff. So you want to go ahead and squeeze in that new data store in there, or if it's a raw device map data store, whatever the case may be, you can do that there. Did that answer that question here?
Yeah, it does. That was awesome. Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, no worries.
So I'm going to go ahead and steal back from you. So hopefully that was a lot of really good stuff there. I know we're coming up on hour number 3. So where'd the mouse go? There it is. All right, so let's go ahead and steal here. So yeah, that's actually really great as far as, like, as I said, recommending those recommendations, right? Because that recommendations engine is really great. It's fantastic. Does a lot of really good stuff. But as you could just tell, I question it, right? I have trust issues. It's probably why I'm stressed out all the time too. And if you've been watching me over the years, yeah, the hair is going away, which is really sad. But you know, with our tools, you can go back and check those recommendations, right? And to us, we're very blind to it. Like, we're going to say, yeah, move from this data store to another. And it may be that you're reserving that data store for something else. Or, as in the one that Ed pointed out, maybe it's not exactly that great of a performance. Let's go into SRM and take a look and see what we can do there and just get something brand new. So a lot of really cool stuff. So the last one I really want to talk about here is something I like to call application dashboards. And I put that in air quotes very specifically, and I've already referred to this a couple of times, right? To where an application isn't just a single server, right? It can be a multitude of servers. It could be maybe even a whole grouping. I mean, if you've got Active Directory, you have a whole farm, there's several servers in there. Yeah, you want to see the whole status of all of that. And so that's really where you want to kind of get into is like, what can I really do with these? So give me just 2 seconds to do some magic on the back end. I'm going to just open up demo sites because it's what Ed closed and I forgot to do this during the coffee break. Magic. No one sees a thing. All right. So let me go ahead and share up my dashboard again. And this time I'm going to go back and forth between both my lab environment and my online demo site. So yeah, there's going to be some things to do some little magic on. That's because if you've ever looked at our online demo site, if you ever play with it yourself, it's amazing. It's got a lot of stuff. We intentionally don't let you have admin access to it. So it's not a bad thing, obviously. It's public. We don't want people changing it, but there are some things I kind of need to show off. So for one, I did mention this one before, but right out of the box, this is a very good high-level dashboard. And we have done some customization to it. Obviously, the application map here in the upper right isn't out of the box. We did customize that. But this is really what it looks like directly out of the box. And it's very one-size-fits-all, which is great. But if you've ever been to a sporting event, you get that one-size-fits-all T-shirt or hat, and you notice it doesn't really fit everybody. Especially me. I'm a bit of a bigger guy, and that large shirt's just not going to cut it. So you can go through here and customize these. And I talked about this a little bit. You can hit the little pencil icon here in the upper right, and you can drag and drop, and that's all cool and neat and all, but let's really get into this, right? Now, I will say I am going to go through this fairly quickly. I'm actually going to introduce some brand new things too. But I'm going to give a quick little plug here. So if you guys haven't actually looked at it yet, Kevin mentioned towards the beginning, we do have our Thwack community website, which really is an excellent community website. And one of the things that we do is what we call Solarwinds Labs. And we actually do post these on our Thwack community page. We actually, Kevin and I did one a couple of months ago that we call it How Well Do You Know Orion? And it was actually over this specific topic. So if you want a lot of really good information, I'll have somebody post that in the Q&A so you can go refer to it. Specifically, it's episode 85. But I want to kind of expand on that a little bit, right? Because what I did is I created a dashboard that was about an application. And I kind of left that lab a little open-ended as far as, well, you could do this or that. We'll get into that next time, right? Well, we're kind of in that next time. And there's also one other big thing that was not released yet that we really want to show off that could actually make this even cooler. So real quick, one thing I do want to show off is that you can absolutely go through and sort of segregate these dashboards. And we actually do that segregation out of the box. So if you hover over My Dashboards and you go into Applications, you'll notice there's one in here for Exchange, for SQL, for IIS, Windows, and so forth. A lot of these are out of the box. And what these really are, let me drill down to SQL, is it's the main page, but we filtered it for just SQL. And then, of course, we added a map. Maps aren't out of the box. And we did go over the map bit a little bit earlier. You can create your own maps. You can put them on here. So we've already covered that to an extent. But really and truly, all this dashboard really is, if I customize and go into page settings, it's not going to let me do that. Let me go back under here. Now I've flipped over to my lab environment. I go over to, meant to go to SQL. My apologies, everybody. SQL Server. So I do have a couple of SQL servers on here. And this is the out-of-the-box one. And hey, there it is, the sample map and not a real map. If I go through here, if I click this once to customize page, if I click the same spot again and go to page settings, what you'll see here is we have added a view limitation on here. And what that view limitation does is it just isolates us down to App Insight for SQL and all of our legacy SQL templates. So it is a SQL dashboard. That's exactly what it is. But you can absolutely go through here and hit Edit on here and actually say what kind of limitation you want on here. So this is specifically a limitation for an application. So scroll down here to the bottom, hit Submit. There are other limitations you can put on here as well. I don't really want to delete this one because we all share this. But you can also isolate this by what the server name is. You can isolate this by maybe a different application name. Or one of my favoriteest things to do, you can filter this by custom property. Now, for those of you who haven't been introduced to custom properties, this goes across all products. It is what we call a core feature. Go into all settings, manage custom properties. There are custom properties out of the box, but you can create your own. And we essentially call these tags for your devices, right? And it could be for a device, for an application, for VM, for any of your storage objects. I mean, there is a ton of listings in here. Even on the network side, you can throw these in here too. And when you have these air quotes tags, you can actually put your filters based on those tags as well. So a lot of really cool stuff. One other thing you can do to really customize this out is, and I'm going to go back to that performance analysis piece again. So with performance analysis, as we mentioned earlier, you can go through in here, you can, add in basically whatever you want, right? I'm going to add a few entities onto here, and I'm going to start with SQL. So we are going to do something from scratch. And trust me, there's going to be a method to this madness here. So I'm going to add these two SQL boxes. And once I've added the nodes, so this only gives me the node statistics, CPU, memory, network, but it doesn't give me the SQL statistics. And what I want to do is I want to build a dashboard that shows me all about my SQL environment, more so than what we had here under My Dashboards and Applications and SQL Server. Like, I don't just want to filter on the page. I want legitimate statistics that I might care about as a DBA, right? So I don't necessarily care about the CPU and memory of the machine itself, or maybe I do, but I really want the CPU and memory of the SQL process. How is that being handled? So what I've done so far is I've added the node. Well, this little, we'll call it an octopus looking icon here, This will allow me to add all other entities that are related to this particular entity. And so this will do any application, any database instance, any virtual environment this is connected to, any of the SQL environment, anything you saw in that abstract piece earlier automatically gets added. And I'm going to do the same for SQL 01 too, so I can get those added in here as well. And I want that SQL process. And I know that's going to be under the SQL application. And I can look under here under SQL Server, and boom, there it is. Average CPU, average memory for SQL. So I'm going to do this for SQL 02. Drag and drop this over here. And I'm going to do the same thing for SQL 01. SQL Server, average CPU. I'm going to throw it on the same chart so we can see those side by side. And you know what? I'm going to do the same thing for memory. So go back over here, average memory. Let's go with percent memory. I'm going to make that into a new chart right below it. Same thing. Average percent memory, new chart right below it. Cool. I've got those side by side. And now I'm going to save this. We'll give it a nice, better name. So SQL process monitoring. Cool. Save that. All right. So as I showed off before, I've saved it. I can load it. It's now under here under Find Projects. I've got SQL process monitoring. Cool. Awesome. What do I do with this? Well, let's go back to that SQL dashboard here. So now that I've got that per stack saved off, if I go through here and I say Customize Page, and I can go to Add Widgets, SQL Process. Hey, look at that. SQL Process Monitoring created by, hey, that's me. So now I can just drag and drop this, throw that onto the chart, done and done. So anything I create in PerStack, I can absolutely go through and throw this widget onto a dashboard. So, and I can even expand on this, give it a little bit more of a oomph on here. Really cool stuff. But here's another little topic here. So let's say this is a really cool graph, but I want to span this across the entire screen, right? So yeah, I can go back to Customize Page. I can move this widget around, but you notice we're isolated to these specific columns that I've got here, or I can create new ones, but I can't really do that expansion across the entire environment. Well, we have a new feature for that. So again, this is something brand new to 2020.2. So if you haven't upgraded, I highly encourage you to do so. But what we like to call these is modern dashboards or angular dashboards. So you'll hear the term twice. And to give an example as to what this looks like, I'm going to go back to my lab environment. Yes, I'm done. And to get to this, so for those of you who have upgraded, if you go to Settings, Manage Dashboards. If you don't see this, you probably haven't upgraded, or you might need to look at your user permissions. But if I go to Manage Dashboards, and I can go through here, and I can actually look at all my classic dashboards that I have, as well as all the new ones. Now, on the online demo site, we've actually just isolated it down to this ITOM operational status summary. But what this is, as you can see here, is I now have a new selection of widgets that I have available to me. We have KPI widgets, which I can go through here and just point it to a statistic. And I can even edit this to say, you know, show me what red, yellow, or green, or whatever this, you know, background image should be. Like, what is that threshold? What is that statistic? I can add that on there. So if you wanted to do a dashboard of, you know, how many down nodes do you have? And if it's anything greater than 5, color it red. You can do that. But the other thing you'll notice here too is I've got that similar PerStack dashboard over here, and I've actually expanded it across multiple columns. So up here at the top, I've got a pretty wide one and a narrow widget. Down here in the second row, I have this spanning all 3 of those. And I have another bar graph over here spanning those 3. I can even do pie chart graphs too. So a lot of really good stuff, but more importantly is I can actually expand those performance charts across a wider gamut. So let's put this into practice, right? How do I go through and create these? How do I, you know, put on this what I want to put on this? So let me go back to my lab environment, and I'm going to go into Settings and Manage Dashboards. And now since this is my lab environment, I see all my classic dashboards on here. But I'm going to say add a modern dashboard. And I'm going to put my initials on it because we do share this environment. So MQ SQL environments. Ooh, I can't spell. There we go. And let's go ahead and immediately open this dashboard for editing. So let's create this. And here we have a blank slate. So similar to what we had with all the classic dashboards, in the upper right corner, we've got drag to create a new widget. I'm going to drag and drop that here. Cool. Let's configure it. So over here, we've got our 4 widget types. We have KPI widgets, proportional, table widgets, and time series. So we're already really working on that performance one. So let's go ahead and take the time series one. And the time series widgets, I'm going to say customize here. And this is going to be based off any perf stacks that I create. So sure enough, edit model. Hey, there's that one I just created. So let's save that. Widget preview. We'll give this one a nice title. So SQL process monitoring. And time series, we'll call it last 24 hours. All right. Create widget. Boom. There I have it. Nice and squished. So let's get that little expansion there. And looks like we got a little bit of a column here. So let's just go ahead and expand that. So cool. Much better. Make that as wide as I want. Now let's get some more information on here, because what good is just a SQL dashboard with just a couple of performance metrics, right? So not going to lie, I cheated. I went ahead and actually did this beforehand, tested it. I've already got my queries ready to go. So I'm going to drag and drop here another widget. And I'm going to say finish configuring. And what's really cool is any of those previous widgets you've created are also on here. So if you want to search for this later on, you can. So that SQL process monitoring from my MQSQL dashboard that I created is already here. So if I want to move this to a different dashboard, I can do this really quickly and easily. But let's make a table widget. So I'm going to say customize this. And I'm going to take the data and calculations here. And like I said, I did cheat. I can use a graphical query editor. So I could say edit. And this allows me to go through and say select an application or component or a node or an interface, which is great. It makes it really easy to create these new dashboards. But I cheated. I'm going to say hand edit a SQL query, do some magic here on the left side of my screen, and copy and paste over here. And now I have this query. So I know this is being recorded for solidarity purposes. So I'm going to leave it on the screen for just another second if anyone really wants to copy this. But I could say show records on this one. So I could see databases and instances. So what this query is it's actually going through and giving me a list of all of my databases by percent utilization. So because this is a summary screen, I want to see a listing of each one of the databases, not the instances, but the databases themselves, and show me what their percent utilization is. So who are my top databases by percent utilization? So save that. And now, since it's a table, say add new column. First one, this will be database name. Show this column, and it is, formatter, value, database name. There's no format needed. It's just the name of the database. Cool. Add another column. I want the name of the instance. So, Control V, Shift, database. I can blame this on the fact that I've got a new keyboard. That's a good excuse, right? And now, the database instance name. Cool. One more. And we'll call this percent utilization. And you notice I can do a column width. So if I want to lock the column width, I can do that. But now I could say, give me percent used. And I can even say this is a simple number. And put a label on the out. Percent used. And on the suffix, I'll put the percent on there. Cool. I've already got this sorted by my top utilization, so create widgets. Oh, Prefix, do not show. Oh. Well, I can do an icon on here too. It's a database. Cool. Cool little icon on that too. All right, create that widget. So now I've got my table. Again, I can expand this out, make this really large so I can see all my top ones. And even better, I'm going to make one more on here. Again, finish. I'm going to do something very, very similar with the table widget. Oh, I forgot to rename it. That's all right. Customize this one more time. And rather than do this by percent utilization, I could also do this by just the raw number. So again, I'm going to cheat. The other cool thing, so you'll notice this is what we call Swickle. So that stands for Solarwinds Query Language. And it's basically transact SQL. Now, if you want to know more information about this, or maybe you're like, wow, really, SQL queries, that's where he's going? I don't do SQL. Neither do I. It's actually really easy to pick up. So there's a lot of really good resources on our Slack community. And actually, we just did another one of those SolarWinds Lab videos where we did an introduction to Swickle. So don't be afraid of it. And there are actually a lot of places within the product you can actually pull this query out, like with reports or even in alerts. So there's a lot of really good stuff here. And you can go through and edit this because I'm doing use space by megabytes. We store it in kilobytes. So I can even do math against this. So it actually shows there's my utilization. So save that model. And same thing. I've already got database name and instance. So add one more column. Description, label, used space, property and formatting. It is let's do a threshold value. I can put a linear bar chart on this. Just show the value. Let's do that. Utilization, threshold. I'm going to make it the same as CPU load because it's just 90%. And yep, that's good. It's not a percent. I took the formatting for the previous one, so that's why it says a percent on there. Let's do simple number instead. Utilization, suffix, MB. Even better. Create widget. Database. There we go. Create widget. And now, same thing, except now I've got it by database size as well. So again, a lot of really cool stuff. I'm going to end it right there so I don't bore you guys too much with it. If I can get my mouse right at the perfect spot. There. There we go. Make that a little bit wider. So now I can actually see, and you'll even notice my top one by use space, not the same one as my top one by percent utilization because it's a smaller database. So a lot of really cool stuff you can do here. Give you guys a few ideas as far as what you can do in terms of customizing a dashboard. And obviously you can apply this to more than just SQL. If you do want to put those maps on here, you do want to put those transactions from Web Performance Monitor, you can absolutely do that. But again, this is a feature of 2020.2. So this is part of that new version. So if you haven't done so already, you would want to upgrade. And what's really cool about this, kind of ending that section, is a lot of people have been very hesitant to do those upgrades because I'm still on an older version. Like I'm on Windows 2012, and if I'm going to upgrade to the latest version, I've got to migrate to 2016, 2019, and I'm just not in a position to do that right now. Well, one of the cool things is that we've actually reduced some of those barriers to upgrade. So we now have added back Windows and SQL 2012 support. So if you want to get to that latest version of 2020.2, you're at the latest version we had, which was like 2018.4. It's a direct upgrade. And the cool thing about the upgrade is if you haven't done one in a while, and this started back on, I know it was NPM 12.1 at least, you can actually upgrade from that version directly to the latest version. There's no middleman that you have to do. Like, I don't have to do a step upgrade. But the coolest part to it is you can do every product at once. So no more is there that, oh, I have to upgrade NPM. Oh, I have to upgrade SAM. Oh, I have to upgrade all the other products. You run the installer one time. We recognize what you have, and we continue the upgrade from there. So now there are still a couple other barriers onto this as well. One of which is that if you are utilizing like our NetFlow traffic analyzer, that does have a requirement for SQL 2016. That's because we use in-memory tables, and that feature wasn't introduced until 2016. But even better, we have SQL Server Express support now for those smaller environments. No, you're not going to have too much NetFlow data if you do go SQL Express because you have a 10 gig limit, but you can do that as a stopgap if you need to. Also, we've added a third database for what we call Orion log viewers. So now syslog and traps are now available as a separate database. But again, we utilize in-memory tables, so you'll still need that 2016. So if you want to utilize SQL Express to kind of segue into that, you can absolutely do that. I think that's what our barriers were to upgrade. Kevin, I think I'll segue it back to you. Is there anything I missed there?
No, that's pretty much it. The upgrade's gotten significantly easier. Matt has mentioned that I'm actually working with someone right now who's crafting a story where he went from 2 releases ago. So he was 2019 2, I think. He was one of those, or even before that, if we're talking the NPM family. So he went from there and went all the way to 2020 in one change window, where he used to take multiple change windows to upgrade them all. And to answer the question that just came in, no, NPM, Network Performance Monitor, does not require SQL 2016. It will run on 2012. The requirements for 2016, for SQL 2016 SP2 or later is Orion Log Analyzer or NetFlow Traffic Analyzer. But all of the rest of the other products will run on a 2012 backend. All right. I guess, let's see. Can I still control? I can still control these. I'm assuming everyone can see Thwack now. So Matt made a quick mention where we have tons and tons of stuff on Thwack. Yes, this is where we really go in and kind of, it's where we do the best kind of outfacing for the company. It's where we have the content exchange. It's where we show our Solarwinds Lab that Matt mentioned, which I think I put the proper link in the chat, where he and I talked about like the tips and tricks for Orion. It is where we've got SolarWinds Lab. And speaking of SolarWinds Lab, we have a lab coming up actually tomorrow. Now this one is exclusive for customers. So if you're an existing customer for any product, you're welcome to join this lab. We normally do not gate lab this one since it is an academy training. We are gating it, unfortunately. But this is an exclusive event. First time we're doing it. It's an hour and a half. We never let labs run this long. But if you're interested, you can go to lab.solarwinds.com and sign up there. Cheryl has been a trainer for SolarWinds, specifically building stuff for the Academy for a number of years now. So I highly encourage you to sign up. I think you'll actually have a really fantastic experience. And she's going to be taking questions live, which is amazing. And then last but not least, have you already blocked your calendar, right? Everyone's already blocked their calendar for November 12th and 13th when we're having Thwack Camp this year. If you're not familiar with Thwack Camp, I will give you the dime tour. Thwack Camp is SolarWinds' premier virtual event that we have every single year. This is going to be our 9th year, and we were doing virtual events before. It was cool to do virtual events. So please sign up. Registration will open, excuse me, registration will open up fully on September 1st, but you can go today to thwackcamp.com to get a reminder for that date. You can also obviously block your own calendars if you would like. We're also going to be pumping additional content onto thwackcamp.com, and we're going to be putting, one of the links there is actually to the previous year's Thwack Camp. So if you want to catch up and maybe watch some stuff from last year, it's all available there as well.